A copium is not a direct solution that necessitates pulling out a lot of prioritization of resources for bad roots. As someone living in these areas where you need a food to eat, a state running with symbolisms is just simply insulting. Note the framing coming from Joseph. It's active promotion. CEO already did the job of government's burden since they move into their impacts before actually fulfilling their burden to frame the debate. I.e., when we talk about active promotion, it requires the state itself to become an active agent of religious advancement, e.g., using its official powers, funds, or programs within these areas to expand religious belief or participation in these areas. We argue that the state already has a better advanced, evidence-based alternative to address the issues in this scarcity of and also poverty without resorting to symbolism that you get from side government. Instead of spending on all of these faith campaigns, government can just simply mobilize civic groups and private sector partnerships to deliver real social welfare that you need in these areas. And to answer Gov's disingenuous attempt to symmetricalize this mechanism, Joseph already stated that you have limited resources. You cannot state that you will do this mech while also actively promoting the other one, since most of the time, this really drains a lot of resources, especially when you need to persuade a lot of criminals in these areas to take into your religious group, for example. Take the trade-off. It's already clear. More importantly, the state has both the moral and fiscal responsibility to redistribute resources from wealthier regions, for example, to poorer ones. That is its function. It's not to hand out prayers as a policy, because that's just an insult to these people who voted for you to do your job, especially when resources are already limited. In Gov, they want these politicians to run out of their real responsibility, placing it on religious sectors. In terms of risk analysis, the model coming from Gov is just simply failing in magnitude. Note the real characterization of people in these areas. They are mad because they're placed in the worst living condition, and crimes are really, really rampant in these areas, like hoods, for instance. And this is where both Gov teams fail. Just ask yourself the basic mechanism question. How will the stakeholders view religious group, especially when they know that states chooses to do this in an urgent situation? Just like what happens in a lot of underdeveloping states, these people are going to be enraged. CG also failed because they assumed that religious sectors will be absorbed easily in these areas. In fact, it's less likely for them to accept religion, especially when in these areas, many people needs to steal and rob in order for them to survive. Even if they're not enraged, bro, this quote-unquote spiritual help will not ease their urge for survival. This is the reason why religious sect, even absent this policy, right? Even absent this active promotion, are already weak in these areas because they need a lot of survival modes, like stealing, for example, in order for them to have food in their table, in order for them to thrive. That's why inside government, you need to concede to the fact that you need to pull a lot of resources to promote religious group in these areas if that's your main proposition, which also simply flips the premise coming from CG and also fulfills the link that to prove OO's assumptive and vague impacts. You cannot just assume that gangs will stop their operation and a lot of people will suddenly ignore the need of survival of their parents and kids, for example. Not all of people are God-fearing in the baseline, and you cannot just magically wish that they will suddenly change because of this proposition. You guys are already out in the comparative. But why is this most likely the case? Another metric, effectiveness. Remember, poor areas exist because they don't just lack resources. They also lack proper education, which includes family planning, for example. Again, ask yourself, if majority of religions are against reproductive health and holds a lot of extreme conservative beliefs, what type of spiritual help can actually alleviate these people? We claim that even if they accept their teachings and all of and suddenly we magically persuade them to opt in within these religious sectors, they will be placed in a worse condition. Next, religions are selective. These areas have diverse people, like gay people, for example. In helping these areas, you want to be efficient in order for you to evolve their conditions at large, because the state cannot force a Roman Catholic churches to be pro-LGBT in these areas, for example. Hence, this is just a band-aid solution to only few people that can effectively opt into this if it suddenly magically works. The new mech coming from CG controlling the rallies of religions also, for example, are just simply unrealistic, and the line above already proved this. Remember, we still have a law of doctrine of separation of church and state. They cannot impede each other's operation, although they can support each other, i.e. positive and negative transactions. This is already intuitive. That's why government cannot just simply push out a lot of religious sectors, just say, oh, don't rally bad policies against LGBTQ, for example, in these areas, and don't harm these people in your rhetorics. TLDR, it's risky in terms of ROI, and also it doesn't fix the problem at all, even if we do buy them. Because again, what kind of help and education are you going to get from this spiritual help, especially when you lack proper resources, you also lack proper pooling of like education. Why, maybe you guys are poor because okay, I'll take the POI.
We do not understand your sovereign impact. What actually changes on your side of the house that was not mentioned on the law?
Again, it was mentioned already as an alternative. This is not a policy debate. We just pointed out that a lot of options are available. Take a look at the WBC manual. The comparative coming from Joseph literally solves the problem in these areas. They opt in to crimes because they lack resources. Even if we provide them with better aids and condition, we directly target these areas. And this also solves the problem of scarcity because pooling of resources from richer regions as a state with fiscal autonomy provides you a basic baseline of level of resources and at least more police power in these areas to get into root causes. And also, that's also part of your comparative, bro. You're also stating that, this happens in both sides of the house. But right now, we're proving why this happens better in our side and much more. It's going to be much more effective and realistic. Because again, you need to take the trade-off. Even if that's not working, even if you take out that alternative, you guys are losing in effectivity and risk analysis. Next, why states are not the best suited actor to do this action. I want to point out that at no point in this debate do any team from GOB explain why the state's nature is actually suited to be in good faith. Note, when politicians do this, as mentioned earlier, they're not doing the job that they're voted for. And second, this is where the characterization from Joseph becomes crucial. States doing this means that they are escaping their job. Why is this most likely to be true? Note that most of the time, poor areas exist due to bad governance. Probably you already have a lot of corrupt politicians here. They're using religion as a scapegoat coming from Joseph because his spiritual appeal is also hard to beat. There's no logical reason behind it. So, just in case that you guys are successful in all of your propagandas, in all of your proposition, just in case then, that spiritual help coming from God actually happened, why is it going to be really, really bad? It's going to be bad because it converts moral legitimacy into a strategic disguise for institutional decay. Under scarcity, where each policy decision reveals political priorities, an administration that spends on religious promotion reveals that it no longer intends to solve the poverty. It just intends to aestheticize it in order to immortalize their image. So therefore, a government that prays instead of performs does not lead the faithful. It just simply betrays them.